What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Mic Check Podcast. This is T Word, the People's Champ, here with my co-host Q. This is our post-fight reaction to the Davis Garcia pay-per-view, one of the bigger boxing events of the year, potentially the biggest thus far for sure. Marquee fighters, very popular fighters to say the least. So, Q, what's good with you, bro?
Hey, nothing much, man. Yesterday was a good day of boxing. Some stuff that I'm sure we'll get into in some other videos with the UK card that happened right before Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia. That was a good card. And then we had a pretty solid main event that we're going to get to talk about here today. Like you said, one of the more popular fights that'll probably happen this year. So another solid day for boxing overall.
For sure. This past week I was actually in Vegas from Sunday the 16th through Friday 21st. So I got back home before the fight traffic got to Vegas, and trust me, the price is the same no matter what's going on. It's expensive out there. But the buzz of the event, I thought I shared a little bit of it on social media. Don't really like dropping my location when I'm in certain places. So you got a lot of it delayed. But the few things that I shared, I went to some of the events. I went to the Grand Arrivals. Tank was hella late. It was hella unprofessional. I didn't like that. Ryan was there. He was very cordial. Oscar, they did their showmanship. I did appreciate that. They definitely bought into we have to sell the fight. So Tank eventually shows up. He's up there 7 minutes. And you guys probably saw this on YouTube already. So this isn't something you don't already know. But I thought it was a good start to the week on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I went over to the media workouts for the undercard fighters. While I was out there, I ran into Floyd Schofield and Sean Porter. But Schofield got a second round knockout on the undercard. But I got to see a lot of the fighters up close, and a lot of them looked good. They looked in shape. It looked like everybody came to take care of business. Ryan showed up for the media workout. Tank did not. But there was a separate media section in the MGM Grand Garden Arena where they did like a private media row. And Tank did show up for that. So a lot of the exclusive one-on-one interviews you see with Tank on the side and Ryan and Coach Calvin and Joe Goosen, those were in a separate section. So I didn't get access to any of those. But overall, you can see that the buzz was there. And then the airport, as I was leaving on Friday, the buzz for this fight was kind of ridiculous. The people that were coming in and how many flights were flooding. The price of the hotels we were staying in actually jacked up for the weekend where we couldn't even extend reservations. So it looked like it was going to line up for something. And eventually the numbers would come out. Now, getting into the fight, I'm going to throw it your way first. So we're strictly talking about the main event, guys. Getting into the fight, what were your thoughts as they were coming to the ring and you saw both of them get into the ring? How were you feeling about the fight in general at that point?
I think in general, my expectations for this fight, once it got made, once it got signed, was, my immediate reaction how well Ryan looked coming into the ring, right? We all know that, there were some weight clause issues. There were some rehydration clauses that had to be agreed upon that Ryan eventually did concede to in order to have the fight to happen. And the one thing I wanted to find out was how thin did he look, because he looked fairly thin. He looked a little bit sluggish, I would say, from the clips and the videos that I saw online during fight week, which I guess would be normal if you're making that strong of a weight cut. Yeah. That's going to be the most drained time that you are having through the process. But overall, I was optimistic that we would get an extremely entertaining fight, that we would get a back and forth tilt. But that was just my anticipation of what I was hoping for when I did sit down to, get ready to watch.
For sure. I can tell you for sure. So what I thought was, I thought Ryan came in, he looked very thin to me. And I'm a stout person, but even like in the presence of somebody, you could kind of size them up. And when I saw him 2 days in a row in person, and he's just, honestly, Ryan's kind of a thin dude, even when he's muscular, when he's above weight. But I thought he probably was underweight coming to Vegas because he got there Monday. And I think he was already underweight. And that's why he was able to eat, because he cut too much weight. So he probably really could have made 135, to be honest. And I think that he was trying to get his weight back up because he cut too much. So I think that might have been some of what you saw. He looked a little hot sometimes in the jaw. because I just think that he might have cut his weight too early. And if he looked sluggish, he seemed to have energy. He turned the charm on for all the press stuff. But in the workouts, I didn't see an explosive fight or anything like that. So you're probably onto something there. Now we're gonna go ahead and get right into it, and let's do it. We did 7 rounds last night, so let's break it up into 2 rounds at a time. Round 1 and 2 were kind of a little bit of a night and day thing. So I'm gonna throw it your way first. What you think about those first 2 rounds?
Yeah, I thought the first round was really the only possibly clear round that Ryan won. Reason being, he's shooting a jab. He took center ring. He controlled kind of the geography of the ring, and Tank did most of the moving during that round. And to be honest with you, I can't recall that Tank even landed anything significant in that round. So that was a round that I clearly gave to Ryan, just because I felt like, just based on real estate, just based on being able to control where the fight was happening, that was something that clearly gave him the advantage. And then in round 2 is when I thought that it started to flip. Obviously round 2 was the round that Ryan gets knocked down. That's the round where he becomes extremely cautious and selective in what he's going to throw, because for whatever reason it seemed like he was not able to get his head off the line from Tank's straight backhands. And that's kind of a surprise, because if there were 2 things that we knew coming into the fight, was that Tank was going to have to be worried of the check left hook from Ryan, and Ryan was going to have to be worrisome of the straight left hand from Tank. Those are both of those 2 fighters money punches, while Tank is a little bit more well-rounded with some other assets. I think the one thing he kind of forgot about realistically was he had to get his head off the line, and he was not able to do that in round 2, and ultimately that's what led him to get knocked down.
Yeah. No, and from my perspective, I tend to agree. Round 1, I clearly gave to Ryan, and while I don't feel like he did anything to necessarily win the round, he certainly didn't lose it. I thought Tank was very inactive in the first round, and like you said, he moved, and I think he was trying to get Ryan to mirror him from a strategic standpoint, trying to get that mirror. If I go here, you go here. If I can get you to follow me around, I can walk you into something, because I'm going to break your base because you're moving. And I think he was trying to find the timing initially, and it really just stymied all of his output. And then Ryan was doing what he's supposed to do. Like you said, if you're not going to engage me, I'm going to control the geography. I'm going to make it aesthetically pleasing for the judges to give me this round. I'm going to throw punches. And he didn't even throw many of that signature hook. He really didn't throw that in the first round. He threw it a little, but he definitely was on his stick. He had that jab, and like you said, he just didn't move off the center line. Round 2, he got a little bit of false confidence. Maybe he said he got bored in the post-fight interview. He said he got bored, so he had to start doing something because Tank wouldn't engage, and that could have been gamesmanship after the fact, or just honestly he didn't know anything else to do. So he started to try to hook more. And here's something I've always said about Ryan. I said about Tim Tszyu, and I said about a couple other fighters, sometimes Boots. Everything is at the same speed, hard as hell. When you throw everything at the same speed, a boxer with ring IQ can time you, because it becomes pattern recognition. And that's something that you got to give Tank credit for. He caught Rolly's pattern, he caught Hector's pattern, he caught Mario Barrios and Leo Santa Cruz, and he caught Ryan. Eventually that's going to show up. So in the second round, I felt like Ryan was in control of the round right up until the knockdown, and then it swings Tank's way. So let's stop there for a second. And did you get a chance to look at the scorecards? I know you've been on Twitter already today. Did you get to see the second round scorecards?
Yeah, so I saw that there were a couple of judges, or at least one judge, that gave a 10-9 round, even though Ryan was knocked down in that round. My interpretation of that is that the judge was going to score that round a 10-9 round in Ryan's favor, but because of the knockdown, he decided to score it just a 10-9 in the other direction to Tank. I guess situation, I would probably have said that if I was the judge, and I guess you have to use a 10 round, a 10-point system. But that's the one thing I think I probably would have changed. I probably would have made it 9-8 if that was something that was an option. Obviously, that's not an option, because there's a 10-point must system for every round. But I guess I could understand it to a certain extent. If he gets the knockdown, but he's not the one who dominated the round for the majority of it, I guess I could see why they only gave him a point differential in that round.
Now, let me throw this one at you. So 2 judges gave it 10-9. 1 judge came up with 10-10.
Yeah. No.
Where they do that at?
No.
Can I tell you which judge? Weisfeld.
Yeah, Steve Weisfeld.
So Weisfeld has had a few cards that were wide. In the Charlo versus Castaño one, if I'm not mistaken, Weisfeld had it heavily in favor of Charlo in the first fight.
Mm-hmm.
I like Charlo and I couldn't score it that way. I had it even. And he had to come back to get even on my scorecards. He had to win the last 3. And then there's another fight he did recently. Weisfeld had some really funky scorecards, so I'm not surprised by 10-10. I'm not saying there's some corruption, but what I'm saying is that don't make no damn sense, and maybe it's time for that judge to move on. But like you said, I agree. I think 10-9 was fair. If you clearly had Ryan ahead leading up to the knockdown, and then you just flip the score because it would have went 10-9 the other way, I think that would have been fair. Since it's 10 point must system. All right, so we're gonna go to rounds 3 and 4 post knockdown. By the way, after the knockdown, I felt like Ryan was a little tentative, and it allowed Tank to make a nice rally in the round to go ahead and swing it his way. And I think that you agree. So going into rounds 3 and 4, what was your perspective at that point?
Yeah, at that point, it really became a situation where you kind of started to see the nervous energy from Ryan. I thought first, he set his feet, when he wanted to fire his shots, and he really followed through on those shots in the first round, and even so much in the second round where, he throws, and I think if I remember right, he threw 3 lead hooks in a row. And I for the life of me, I can't understand why people continue to do this when they fight Tank, but throwing the same punch 3 times in a row or in succession back to back has led 3 different guys off the top of my head to getting hurt or getting stopped. And sure. I just don't understand, because it wasn't until I saw the replay that I realized Tank, he leads with a left hook and, Tank ducks under it. He leads with another left hook after they break up, after they get broken up by the referee, and he ducks that one, and then he does it again, and then Tank slips it instead of just ducking and comes over with a left hand. So to me, it was just kind of just bad judgment on his part, and I'm not sure if that comes from not having as much film study as maybe he could have, but ultimately leading into round 3, I think that really deterred him from wanting to sit down on any of his punches.
Yeah.
And it made him a lot less effective, because now he's giving up real estate and he's allowing Tank to get close to him, which is the thing that was the only way I thought he was going to be able to win the fight, was to keep it at distance. And he was not able to do that, because after the second round knockdown, he was extremely selective and very cautious about what he was going to throw and when he wanted to throw it.
For sure. Now let's talk strategy here. So in round 3 and 4, this is where I saw Tank establish he was going to take control of the fight, because you could say round 6, Ryan maybe started to figure something out and got his courage back, but we're stuck on 3 and 4 right now. Something I saw very specific, when Ryan would throw with his lead hand, number 1, Tank took his lead hand away. Just reaching, pawing, tapping the glove. He made it to where he could prompt Ryan to throw it versus allowing him to pick when he wanted to throw his own punch. So he would touch it, then Ryan would extend, or he would push it back and Ryan would throw the hook. Because I can tell what you're going to do by where I put your hand, now I know what punch you're going to throw. Now there's a tell, because I was thinking to myself, it's got to be a tell. And then I realized he was whichever way. If he pushed it far enough, Ryan would come back with the hook or the jab, whatever. What Ryan could have done at that point, without changing too much of his strategy, is his lead foot position was off. He was stepping inside, so it puts you on the line. So that talks about what you're saying. But then also, he didn't feint at all. No. Did you remember any feints? So if you throw, if you're throwing the jab and you jab, feint the jab, you could come with that quick whipping hook and you probably catch Tank or slow it down. So when he ducks and comes up, you catch him on the way up. Once you hit him with it once, he's got to look out for it, and it changes his strategy, and now you're playing chess. I thought that would have been a good adjustment for Ryan, and I'm wondering why Joe Goosen just kept telling him, that's good. keep throwing the jab, and he wasn't giving him any instructions to feint. Did you listen in on the corner? I don't know if you could hear, because like you said, you were at a party or something like that for the fight. Could you hear the trainer tracks in the corner?
So I didn't hear a whole lot of it
Okay.
between rounds, but my thoughts just watching the fight as is, I was a little bit surprised from both fighters that neither one of them really cut angles. Usually when you have an orthodox guy fighting against a southpaw, the one thing that you're going to see is you're going to see both guys trying to get lead foot advantage, trying to get to the side, trying to get to that slot pocket where they would be able to come around with their backhand hooks, with their front lead, body shots, to the midsection. And it was very interesting because Ryan didn't try it at all. And I was even surprised that Tank only did it a few times that I can recall, where he took that outside lead foot from the right-hand side and pretty much just stuck to the right-hand side, pivoted his body around to try to get Ryan kind of facing away from him.
Yeah, the T-bone shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The only times I actually saw Tank really doing that was when he was backed up against the ropes.
Yeah.
It wasn't too often, but he did do that on a couple of occasions where he was able to get to that slot corner and use that to kind of try to get some shots off where Ryan was defenseless.
Sure.
Ultimately, after Tank really got rolling in the third round, I felt like he was picking and choosing what he wanted to do at certain points during the fight. But he always obviously had to be cautious because he knows that he's in there with a guy that's at the very least equally as fast as him. For whatever reason, Ryan was not convinced that he could, put more than one or two punches together because he was so cautious about being countered.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. And to agree with your point, Tank didn't really use many pivots early. Similar to, he didn't pivot until he felt like he got in control against Hector Garcia. I start to see that, like you said, early on, it was kind of, he was using the pivot to get off the ropes. Later in the fight, you get into the fifth round, and we could fast forward to that because third and fourth were kind of mirror images. They would tie up, Ryan would rough him up on the inside, but other than that, Tank kind of controlled real estate. He backed him up when he wanted. He backed up on his own when he wanted. So those two rounds, in my opinion, were clear Tank rounds. So at this point, I think we're both at 3-1, right?
Yeah, 3-1.
Okay, so going into the fifth, I felt like it was much of the same. I saw Tank doing what he was already doing, and now you're starting to see some breathing room on the scorecard. So now Ryan has to switch up his strategy, and going into the sixth, I thought he did. So fifth and sixth round, what did it look like from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, the fifth round was more of the same. They were clear-cut rounds for Gervonta. I thought that Tank really put together some nice combination punching. He was able to get inside of Ryan's jab, whether he was slipping inside of it, whether he was parrying the jab that Ryan was throwing out there to slip to the inside where he would be at a distance that's safe enough for him to attack. And the one thing he did do quite a bit was he was able to fight off of the break. And I thought that was something that was really interesting because I haven't seen Gervonta do that a whole lot in fights, but he was able to do that at times where they would be caught, trying to tie up. Ryan would be trying to tie him up, but he didn't allow himself to be tied up so easily as he's done in previous fights. So that was I was impressed with by him. And I thought really in the sixth round really is where things started to take a slight turn back towards Ryan's favor, but definitely the fifth round was more of the same. Talk about what he had been able to do in the second and the third.
For sure. Now, I have an idea what I thought was different in the sixth round. Was there something in particular you saw that started to move the tide back in Ryan's favor? Not necessarily swing the tide, but looked like something changed in Ryan that made you feel that way? What was it for you?
I thought he just was more willing to use the backhand. I felt like most of the fight, he limited himself to being a one-handed fighter. Whether he was trying to jab or whether he was trying to lead hook, he really didn't use his backhand. And it's funny because that's something that Gervonta actually said in a press conference leading up to the fight was that, you don't have a right hand. You don't have a right hand. And for whatever reason, Ryan was choosing not to throw it, whether it was because of what we mentioned before, him trying to avoid being countered, or whether he didn't feel like it was going to get there quick enough before Gervonta could get out of the way. I thought that he was able to land a few right hands, and I thought that he was able to get Tank against the ropes a few times where he could unload where Tank couldn't move. That's what I also
Yeah.
noticed in that round.
Just being bigger. Yeah.
Tank spent a little bit more time on the ropes in that round 6, and that allowed Ryan to get off some shots and unload more than just those 1s and 2s that he had been throwing previously.
For sure. So what I think happened, it's a similar thing. I have a different idea of how we got there, though. I think it took Ryan that long to figure out my left hand is gone at this point. You know, Tank nullified. Basically, he put his left hand in his pocket, and now you've got to use the backhand because Tank couldn't parry the right hand. So he's got to use that backhand at that point. And I think that's what happened. It took Ryan that long. So when we talk about things like ring IQ and stuff like that, Tank seemed to be continuously adding a wrinkle round by round to gain control. And it took Ryan 3 rounds or 4 rounds to figure out what the wrinkles were. So that kind of tells you when people say there's levels to this shit, that's a level much above. And that's what I try to explain to people before the fight. Tank is so good at landing those power punches and setting it up. People don't credit his ring IQ for adjustments, and you have to give credit to his corner, Coach Kenny, Coach Calvin, but at the end of the day, the fighter in there still has to execute the game plan, and they have to understand why for it to be used at the right time. That's why Bud is so good, because they understand when to execute those wrinkles that the coach give them. And I thought that it took Ryan longer because he's not been in that position. He's been able to overwhelm people when he's not the better boxer. So 6th round is over. We obviously both we could have given it to Ryan. I thought it was kind of even, but I felt like Ryan was putting up a really good fight heading out of the 6th into the 7th. I picked it to finish in under 6 rounds. What was your prediction before the fight?
Yeah, so I thought initially when the fight initially got made, this is way back in like last November. So we're talking, late 2022. Yeah. I thought that Ryan would be able to box his way to a decision victory because I thought that he would keep Tank at bay. He'd keep him at bay by using the jab, and that Tank would be cautious of coming in straight lines because of the fact that Ryan would have been able to land a few hooks that kept him at bay. But leading up to the fight, as I really started to kind of dive into looking at some of his previous performances, especially when you talk about, his last 2 performances, talking about Ryan, I just kind of was convinced that, even if Ryan is having a decent outing as far as, his boxing ability is concerned, ultimately, I thought that he would make some mistakes that would put him in a position to get hurt. And ultimately it did. I thought that it probably was going to happen a little bit later. I thought that he was going to get stopped probably around rounds 9 or 10. I thought that he'd get knocked down a few times and then he'd be able to get up and continue. But ultimately he'd submit. Just happened a few rounds earlier than I expected.
Yeah, that's fair. And I thought, the Vegas money was kind of close to that too. A lot of predictions I saw online were very close to that. A lot of people were thinking 9-10. Like, he's going to get past the halfway point. I was thinking, like, when I saw them in person, it made me feel like Tank was ready to knock his ass out early and go home early. And they were starting to fight early. I'm like, this dude going to be on the strip by midnight. You know what I'm saying? But obviously it went past that. We get to 7 rounds and it felt like it was a good back and forth. Like I said, it felt like Ryan was starting to figure out some effective things. The backhand was coming into play. He was making Tank work harder, and now Tank was having to process and change. And sometimes Tank takes a little time to download the information, as they say. I like to say process. It takes him a little while to process what's happening and then spit out a game plan. But I felt like he's been a lot better at that. So you can see that's happening in the 7th round. And then you see the exchange, and just leading to what you're saying about the backhand, the right hand, Ryan actually lands a backhand on Tank when he lands that body shot. What I see looks like a liver shot to me, and it ends the fight. Now, we went back and forth about this on Twitter, so let's talk about that part. Did you want to say anything about the 7th, or do you want to talk about your thoughts of how Ryan responded to that body shot and how the fight ended?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll get right to that, man, because that's the relevant topic of the entire fight, right? Okay. My immediate reaction is what was posted, and I still feel not the right word, but as much talk that went into the fight, as much hoopla and hype that went into the fight, from both sides, really saying that basically I'm willing to do whatever it's going to take for me to get this victory. You're going to have to put me away. I only expected somebody to be asleep. I'm just being honest. Like, I expected them to be in a position where they just literally could not continue.
Okay.
The shot didn't land clean, right? But I will say this. Here's what I'll say. I've seen Tank land a harder body shot on Mario Barrios. The shot he landed on Mario Barrios that put him away at the end of their fight was a more clear and decisive punch from my vantage point than this one was. Now, maybe it was because the placement was different for this punch versus in the Barrios fight. But I would just say that I kind of felt like he had a decision to make because he was coherent, right? There's a point where he backs up. It's a delayed reaction. He kneels down. The ref comes over. I think the ref started his count at around 5. He looks up at the ref at about 8, and then he just continues to shake his head. I've seen guys get knocked out by body shots where they're literally on the floor in a fetal position. You can't. You know, I've seen that happen to quite a few different boxers, whether you're talking about Triple G knockouts. Canelo has had a few knockouts like that against guys. That wasn't this. So I expected that he was going to get up, which is where my disappointment in his response to the punch comes from.
So before I reply, let me ask you this. Have you ever taken a liver shot, a good one or a glancing blow? Okay.
Never once.
I've had several. Let me tell you what that feels like. This is why I believe it. So I've issued several too. So, you know, I'm always here sparring at the crib with the boys and all that stuff. And I've landed some unintentional body shots, meaning it's in sequence of a combination and I don't realize I've landed this shot. You know, I get them to overextend. I fight southpaw. So when they extend over my head, I'm right there to the body and I'm throwing the hooks. The way the delay happens, I've hit them and they've squared up and we're about to engage, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, and they take a knee. Obviously, we have rules that you go down to a knee, you know, we're stopping right there. And they're gonna need a minute to get up. Now, these are not trained boxers, but they're well-conditioned young men. They're working out every day, good solar plexus and core and all that good stuff. And it's had an effect on them no matter the pressure of the punch. If it's placed right, a little bit high, a little bit low, right on the center, it doesn't have to be hard if it's fast and it's the right thing. And you can see the reverberation in Ryan's body when you watch the replay. To me, his brain and his body weren't on the same page. So his brain said, stay your ass down. When he looked at the ref like, I want to get up. However, my body said, nah. And I think that's what happened. I've seen Inoue put some guys down. I've seen some dudes go down and just take a knee and you can't catch your breath. Your heart's racing, your mind's racing. It's millions of people watching. The moment can make that feel a lot worse. It's like getting the air knocked out of you in football and you're just laying there and everybody's watching and you just got your clock clean. It's kind of hard to get up sometimes. And I think that's what happened to Ryan. I mean, if that takes away from the fight, I get it though. It wasn't the sensational knockout we all expected. We felt like if Ryan lands that whipping left hand hook clean, Tank's gonna go to sleep for the first time. Or if Tank lands that sensational uppercut, Ryan's going to sleep for the first time. And we didn't get that. We got a body shot, slow delayed knockdown. So I could get why the luster's not there, but I'm not going to question whether or not it actually hurt like hell because I feel like that shit hurt.
I had no questions that he was hurt. My disappointment came from the fact that it seemed like he didn't make an attempt to continue with the fight because of the fact that he got hurt. Because going into a fight as a body, if you're fighting somebody on your caliber or somebody above the caliber that you've typically fought, you know there's a point in that fight where you're going to get hurt. You know that. So you're going to do something about it. You're going to hold. You're going to move around the ring. You're going to cover up. You're going to do something to try to get you through that moment so that you can regroup and recover. Now, it may not be successful. It might lead to something else. I think that would have just prevented the inevitable because I think if he gets up in that position, he's going to be severely trying to cover his body, which is going to leave his head open in that situation for Tank to pretty much take him out at that point. Yeah. But that's what I was expecting. I thought that he'd get hurt to the body. I even said it at the fight party when we were talking. I said, Ryan's a tall guy. He's a very straight line guy. He doesn't have a whole lot of upper body torso movement to avoid punches.
And a long torso.
I think Tank is going to target his body. And Ryan, like you said, being a thinner guy to begin with, that's always something that boxers are going to test. If you're not a muscular guy, if you're a thin, wiry built guy, that's the first thing that they're going to do. So I wasn't surprised that he got hurt to the body. I was a little bit surprised that he allowed himself to get counted out. Because, I mean, it wasn't a situation where he needed any medical attention. It wasn't a situation where, he was keeled over. Like, for example, when he hit Luke Campbell, you could tell, like, okay, the dude's on both knees. He's on both gloves on the ground. He's not even looking at the ref. He doesn't know where he is at this point. He just knows that he's in pain. Ryan was coherent. He knew what had happened. It just seemed like he was discouraged by the first knockdown, and then he's hurt again. He has a choice whether he wants to get up and get knocked out, or if he wants to just take his knee and take his loss that way. And that just seemed to me like what he decided to do.
I mean, I guess it's a fair assessment that, he made a business decision. I just think that, part of it is if you take the knee and you're thinking about getting up and you're not going to be able to properly defend yourself, that is essentially the same thing as being knocked out. You can't defend yourself. At the end of the day, you're a prize fighter and you want the opportunity to fight for a prize again. Why jeopardize that ability by going in there and just get put to sleep because some people spend some money watching you fight? So at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. I don't feel like I felt like he was good enough to stand up after the count and walk to his corner and get them gloves cut off, but he was not good enough to continue fighting in that condition and be coherent enough to be defensive and offensive and try to continue to fight. So that was kind of my opinion. So folks, that's pretty much all of it right there. Q, did you have any closing thoughts before we get on up out of here, bro?
No, thoughts, I think for me really is just that the fight did not necessarily live up to the hype, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this moving forward when we talk about some other future, pay-per-view fights that are going to happen. It didn't live up to the hype for me as far as from the entertainment value of the fight, but ultimately what it did was it did prove that there is a clear separation between Ryan and Tank, which I guess for most people is something that they already knew, because Ryan is really just, he's just a very popular prospect. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with being a fringe world level contender or a prospect, but a guy who doesn't take a fight with Devin Haney on 2 occasions, a guy who doesn't take a fight with Jojo Diaz on multiple occasions, and then tries to jump to, fight a guy on the level of a Gervonta Davis, that's obviously something different that he's never been in with. So he clearly proved his point and proved that there's a separation of levels between the two of them.
Oh yeah, it's definitely levels to this shit. Tank Davis certainly proved that there's a reason that he is considered a force at 135. Face of boxing, yet to be seen. We don't know. We'll see the numbers at some point, but definitely a force at 135. We will have another video coming out. God bless you, brother. Coming out where we discuss next opponents, what 135 looks like. You have an actual undisputed champion in the weight class. You've got a newcomer to the weight class who's also an established former champion. So that's something we're going to discuss later. But we're going to wrap this one up. This has been T. That's Q. This is the Mic Check Podcast. Garcia versus Davis reaction. Until the next time, folks, we're out. Peace.